Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for another edition of the Arms Bumanlag Project live on this Thursday, October 7th, 2021. Glad to have you along for the ride. We're just before 8 o'clock here, broadcasting live from the beautiful area of Amherstburg, Ontario, in the Little Heart Home Studios. My name is Arms Bumanlag. Happy to have you along for the ride. If it's your first time here on the show, we got a good one for you. The Arms Bumanlag Project is a conversation, in-depth conversation. I like to say it's like Howard Stern meets a little bit of Joe Rogan, meets a little bit of Live and Local, meets in just conversations about all sorts of different topics and things that are happening in our region with interesting people making a difference and having some great insight on a number of topics on the show. And it's a special one tonight because of a couple of reasons. One, my guest tonight, great guy, and he's just a wealth of knowledge when it comes to something I think a lot of us may be struggling with at this time of year, and certainly in the last 2 years with COVID. And then just talking about that sort of elusive dragon, as I used to call it through my various experiences in the world of work. It's that workplace culture and what does that mean, and really putting people in positions to succeed. So we're going to dive into that in the next little bit. But on the show, we have a number of guests that join us each and every week. And last week was no different on the program. If you missed out the latest edition of the Arms Women Light Project, we talked to my good buddy, Stephanie Lianga from Women's Enterprise Skills Training Windsor. Awesome lady. Great conversation. That conversation is up on Spotify and YouTube as we speak. Also, Sylvie Gunther and Maggie DeRoche from the Hiatus House will be joining us live here on the show next Friday, October 15th. The Hiatus House getting geared up to do some amazing fundraising here locally. And I can't wait to share with you what they've got planned over the next little bit. So they'll be joining us next Friday here on the project. Also, a quick reminder for folks who are sending us some fantastic photos. We do feature your photos every single day on our social media feeds. We're asking for local photographers to join the conversation, get your photos featured, and you can share your weather snapshots with me. We do the forecast locally for Windsor, Essex, 7 days a week on our social media pages. You can tag me at Arms Bumanlag for more. Really interested to see those photos as we head into the season of fall as well. So my guest tonight is an assistant professor of management at the Odette School of Business at the University of Windsor, and his research focuses on employee voice and interpersonal team dynamics, including team resilience and conflict. His mission is to help leaders create and sort of sustain highly effective teams. How do you do that? By building their team's resilient capabilities, managing team conflict, which is huge, and motivating their team to speak up with higher quality ideas. Easier said than done, I'm sure. Basically, my guest saying, how can we collaborate and communicate more effectively? And a part of his research, he's worked with large and small companies and organizations to diagnose and improve their human capital challenges. His work has been featured in Forbes, Globe and Mail, and the CBC. Proud to welcome my friend, Kyle Brykman, to the project this evening. Kyle, always good to see you, sir. Welcome to the show.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so let's get into this. How did you get started in this concept and your academic career and where you are at now? And I want to dive into this because this is something I think so many people have questions about how this works out in their workplace lives. How did you get started?
A lot of what I've done is coming from my own personal work experiences. So, I got my PhD at Smith, and before I did all my graduate studies, I worked for a few years, and that's where I got a lot of different experiences. I worked for General Mills Canada in Mississauga. Awesome job, awesome company. Not what I wanted to do at the end of the day. I was there just thinking a lot more about, why are people interacting this way? How am I motivated? We were going through a culture change, and I was always curious about the impact all these decisions had on employees. And I said, well, I love that stuff. Let me go and study it. And so here I am.
Oh my gosh. I mean, it's funny, right? I mean, you talk about sort of that corporate lens, and so many of us are in that corporate world and that corporate environment about culture change and change management and getting to where sort of the culture needs to be. That's a tough nut to crack. Right? I mean, especially during a pandemic, that is a tough nut to crack.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the pandemic's obviously had a huge impact on everybody's culture for better and worse. I think in a lot of senses it's been a lot of improvements, but it has a huge impact when it comes to how cohesive a culture can be. I mean, you're not seeing people as much, so nonverbals, a lot of communication. I mean, imagine all these people and tons of people started a new job during this time, and you're trying to figure out what the corporate culture is like of your environment. It's extremely difficult.
Uh, let's get into that a little bit because I know you've done some extensive work and some studying on the effects of how folks can sort of navigate these waters and sort of best practices as well. You know, is it a question, Kyle, of do businesses have the right feed in terms of the pulse of what's happening in their organizations with so much change happening in the last 2 years with COVID? Or is it the question of the right leaders are in place? Or is it a combination of two to make that happen?
I mean, I think at this point, obviously, we've come a long way. I think people do forget just how new everything was at the beginning, and so we've come a long way. It obviously will. I'm an academic, so my classic answer to every question is going to be it depends, because it depends on the company, it depends on the leader. It depends. This is what we do. We say it depends because it depends on the situation you're in. But I think you're definitely seeing people becoming more comfortable. There's been a lot of benefits to, I don't want to say benefits, but benefits to being able to work from home. A lot of flexibility that people have had. The impact it's had on businesses, though, it really depends, I think, a lot on the size of the company and the kind of leadership style people are used to. I think if you're managing people, it's been extraordinarily hard. But on the flip side, you've probably had a little more slack that you haven't had before. So, again, I think a lot of people are quite enjoying their work lives these days. And so there's something to be said for that.
Why do often, Kyle? I mean, I was doing a lot of research before you came on the show, and certainly my strong opinions about work from home. And I have them, and I've said them many times. I mean, for certain industries, I mean, there's no way you can do it, but there's certain industries where I think I have said many times for folks, I actually tend. I'm a Type A personality, right? So I have my home office literally 2 feet away is my man cave, and I'll go down there and kind of unplug from the day. But then if I got a project on the horizon, I will more than likely watch a half an hour of my show and then come on my computer and work for about 2 to 3 hours. But then I have that flexibility to spend some time with my son in the morning, as opposed to making a commute for an hour and a half. Why do you think some companies are more insistent for getting back to status quo pre-pandemic versus some of the companies that you may see nowadays, Kyle, that are saying, you know what, we trust our employees and we're giving them that autonomy to kind of do their thing?
Yeah, I think you're really onto what the problem is, and I also did like you kind of talking about the Type A because some people can be more self motivated in working from home and so able to get their work done a little bit more easily, where some people are certainly distracted. But from a company perspective, I think some of the challenges that they're having is it's just a bit of a shift. It's an old school way of managing where you feel like you need to see people to know that they're getting the work done. When you think about the metrics we have at work and how we evaluate people's performance, it's often, if I see it, do you show up on time? Do you leave at the right time? Am I able to see you actually getting the work done? Then I can assume you are. And I think it's scary for a lot of leaders to lose that level of control, not being able to necessarily watch the work that they're expecting to have happen. And so it does require quite a bit of shift, trust in your employees. But now we're also seeing lots of people leaving organizations. So if you don't create that environment and demonstrate that trust, you're not really going to have much of a workforce at the end of the day. So that's probably the shift that companies need to make the most. And it is very difficult. It's hard. And like you said, some industries it just doesn't work very well. But that speaks again to creating a really strong, resilient culture that doesn't matter where you're working from, you can still ensure that people are working pretty hard.
Uh, so often I've heard from business industry leaders and folks sort of on that progressive front when it comes to running organizations and companies, Kyle, where they say, we want to be seen as collaborative with our employees. We want to have that open dialogue back and forth. And very much so, we do it by case basis. But when they were able to see, again, those metrics to see, okay, well, I'm giving my employees a better work-life quality balance, they're coming back into the office if it is a hybrid model or if it is a work from home model, or if they should do a weekly check-in, they're happier, they're more engaged, and productivity is going on a higher, I guess, bell curve, as opposed to saying, dragging them into different meetings. By that I mean, I'm not using personal experience. I enjoy meetings, right? But
Yeah.
I'm very much cognizant of having meetings to have some sort of clear objective out of the meeting. I cannot, and I know you've shared some fantastic content on LinkedIn with this.
Yeah.
When meetings have nothing more than to sort of check boxes and it's sort of like an accountability fest, as opposed to saying clear, actionable goals and metrics to move away. Uh, I think that just wears on people when you're just having meetings to have meetings.
Yeah, we've got a meeting culture is, what I've heard a lot of, and it's very true even before the pandemic, but exacerbated now that we've got this meetings culture where people in some industries are meetings packed throughout the day. I don't know how, you could possibly be expected to get your work done. Even before the pandemic, one of my favorite studies that I had read was with Microsoft and how they saw that one group of employees were really kind of stressed out and not really happy with their work, and they're trying to figure out what it is. And it's a big company. They dig in and they see they have back to back to back to back to meetings. They've got no work life balance because they never actually get a chance to get the work done until the meetings are over at 5-6 o'clock, and they're staying late. And so the meetings without any purpose definitely drives me nuts. I don't know that people think about the amount of money you're wasting. Sometimes you've got a meeting of 20 people for an hour. That's 20 man hours, or 20 hours that you could have been doing something else. Again, it's kind of, there's a lot of systems, a lot of norms, a lot of this stuff just kind of becomes embedded, the way that organizations operate. And so we've got this meeting set up, and I guess it's how we're gonna use it. Even it's an hour time, so we're going to find a way to fill an hour. One of the suggestions I often have is, can we reduce that? Can we get it down to 30 minutes? Even just cutting it in half is a huge idea, a huge benefit. But to making our meetings more effective, there's definitely a lot more research now on that. Listening to some actually today, so it's something that we need to start doing better at.
And is it a question, Kyle, do you think, in a management perspective, if you are in that leadership lens, and I've said this, I mean, I was fortunate to be in a management position when I was working retail many moons ago at Devonshire Mall back in 2002, 2003. I was able to run a store, which is no longer there. Best Buy came to town, put us out of business. But when I was running the store, it was like I wanted to make sure that people felt empowered in the roles that they had. So then it was less stress for me, and they were able to make those decisions without fear of repercussion, and use it as a learning experience. So it was a little bit less for me, and then you're empowering these people to feel like they're more invested in their job. Is that wrong? Should we be doing more of that sort of heavy lifting in today's world in these corporations, empowering people to kind of make those decisions?
Yeah, 100%. What you're describing is exactly the kinds of stuff that I preach to organizations, in creating a psychologically safe climate where people aren't afraid to make mistakes. They're not afraid to speak up when they've got an idea. And then they also have the autonomy to make those decisions. When you have things like that, set up in your company, you're able to go hybrid, you're able to go remote because everyone's already started to make these decisions themselves. It actually lets you adapt pretty quickly because people know how to make decisions. They're been given that responsibility in the first place. So what you're describing to me is exactly what every company should have in a good time, but it's something that you need even more in a challenging time. Giving people the autonomy, the flexibility, but again, the room to not be perfect, the room to learn and grow in that space, 100%.
If you're just joining us on the show, we're getting really into the weeds here, but I love it, about workplace culture and the status of work from home, with my guest this evening. We've got a couple of comments rolling in on the feeds. Richard comments saying, "Thanks for keeping the interesting guests on ABP." Hey, Richard, thank you, and thank you to all my guests, including Kyle, for spending time with me. A lot of folks say, Kyle and I were saying before we go live on the show, it's like, why do you do it so late? And it's like, Kyle's a father. I'm a father. Our kids are in bed. We're able to put the kids to bed and then do the broadcast and dive into these topics as they come in. But culture change in an organization, does that happen overnight? How long does that take? And what are some of the bigger successes you've seen with companies who have undertaken that culture change?
It's an easy thing to say. It's extremely difficult to do, but at the same time, I think we sometimes focus on the wrong ways of doing that. I mean, culture changes organically. Culture changes over time. Culture changes when you got a new leader in place and they've got a different vision. You've got a lot of turnover in a company. You're going to see a culture change. The way I try to simplify it, the way that I think it's easiest to think about how you actually change a culture. culture is just basically behaviors that get reinforced and rewarded over time. And so people start doing those sorts of things. If a culture is one in which it's a stay late culture and everyone's grinding and competitive, it's because those are the sorts of behaviors people were rewarded for, and so that's what they did. To me, as simple as I could put it, it's you change the rewards that you change what you're incentivizing people to do, what you encourage them, and I'm not talking just financial rewards. I'm saying as a leader, what you say, that's great, that's what I want to see. So things that you recognize people for. You start changing what you're recognizing and rewarding people for, they're going to start doing something different, right? Their behaviors are going to change, and then the culture kind of follows suit. So it's not a simple directive, but I think we often think about, we need to change this mission overall, and we have got to, just kind of peel everything back. But sometimes it really is just changing what we're rewarding, which is changing the behaviors we're going to do, and that's going to ultimately start to change the culture you see.
When you're able to change that culture, how efficient is it to tie it to something like a strategic plan or even metrics or anything like that? Or is it so more the person connection, the person to person connection, getting on the floor, talking to folks one-on-one?
I think actually they should kind of go hand in hand. When we talk about, values that a company aspires by, and sometimes, and I was working with a company just a couple weeks ago where we're talking, these are the values we have, but how much is that being informed from the people who work there? Or is that just what we say that we value? If it's just the people who are at the top of the organization saying these are our values, if it's not something that everybody's kind of bought in on, then it's just words. And I think we all know that. So you want these not to be what we call espoused. We want these to be actually enacted. We want the people who are on the ground floor, we want everybody involved in saying this is actually what we believe in, taking it to the virtual world, trying to, and if I'm a team leader, because I think of culture often just at a micro level of a team culture. Right? And if you're in a big organization, you're going to have lots of different cultures and different teams, and you've got your overall organizational culture. It's what do I want to value within this team, and how can then everybody else inform the things that we start to do? So again, if we're in this virtual world, how do I know if I get an email right now? Am I supposed to look at it, and am I supposed to respond right away? Is that the most important work that I'm supposed to do? If I want to set up a meeting tomorrow, how do we go about doing that? Am I supposed to respond directly to people? Am I supposed to first, we're in a big meeting and I've got an idea. Do I speak up now, or do I go offline? Like, these are norms that we get reinforced in our culture. This is really what the culture is at the end of the day. As far as I'm concerned, it's really a lot of those norms that we create of how we actually want to interact with each other. If it was a culture I was creating, I would want to encourage people to feel both safe, psychologically safe, but also willing to have conflict and willing to have debates. But that's my personality. And in fact, that's really what culture is. It's reflecting the personality of the leader. That's what I believe in. But again, in that virtual world, if we're not all on the same page and not viewing the culture the same, it's going to be really difficult to get on the same page.
Kyle, Steve Jobs once said, and I believe I'm going to attribute it to Steve Jobs, that, I pay people because of their talent and skill, so I don't have to fill that particular talent and skill. Does that apply to a corporate environment in terms of, having not a hands-off approach, but, I'm paying somebody X amount to do this. I expect them to do what they do and do it well. Or is it more of, like you said, taking that talent or skill and conforming it into what is expected, sort of that culture or that leadership vision that is in place?
I saw a metaphor the day before, and there's all these different anecdotes, metaphors of leadership, but there's one that I definitely like a lot, which is a picture of a leader with their team kind of huddled around them and them holding an umbrella over top them, preventing anything from kind of getting in the way of their team. And I love that because that really is what the leader's job is. It is exactly that. I mean, you're hiring people, if you're a leader, or they were hired to get the job done. It's not your job, and this is where we're kind of talking about micromanaging. Your job is not to do their work for them. And that's going to drive you nuts. That's going to drive them nuts. And it's not helping anybody in the long term because they're not learning how to actually do the work that you're expecting them for. The leader's job is to protect their team from outside, preserving those team meetings, making sure they're not having unnecessary meetings, make sure they have the right resources they need, coaching, building them up, but also knowing when to give them a little bit more harsh criticism, guiding them, mentor them. These are really the things that we're supposed to be doing as a leader. And we get really busy. We got our own pressures from people above us, and we do lose sight of that. So I think that's a quote that I resonates with me. And I don't know all of Steve Jobs' leadership style would.
Sure.
Something I actually talk about in my classes on leadership, but for that angle, absolutely. I don't know about how we go about treating people, maybe a little bit differently, but absolutely bang on with that.
Kyle Brykman is my guest, episode 30 here on the Arms Bumanlag Project. If you're listening to us in the rebroadcast on YouTube or Spotify, we're happy to have you along for the show. Kyle is diving into the world of, cultural leadership, workplace culture, progressive workplaces. We're diving into a lot here on the program this evening. Happy to have him on the program as well. But, I wanted to talk about, taking a look at, having that faith, and certainly I love the word coaching. I've said many times, I'll go back into some stages in my career, particularly in terms of even broadcast, and having the right coach in your corner, to kind of guide you along the way. I would think that skill, in my opinion, is worth its weight in gold, because I think there's, I saw that sort of Facebook meme that goes around, right, where like the boss is sitting behind the desk and he's cracking the whip and people are pulling the desk, where versus say the leader is in front of the people saying we can do this together as a team, and they're all hauling the desk together. So going back to some of my experience, it's like when you're able to have somebody who can kind of inspire and kind of, I think, coach folks. I mean, and then I've honestly heard this in my career too, Kyle. In the flip side, well, I mean, there's no point because they're just going to leave and go somewhere else. To me, that was like, are you kidding? Like, is that not the whole job of the leader? Is to not kind of raise people and go to that particular avenue and grow people so they succeed.
Yeah, exactly. I know. I feel the same way when I hear things. I've heard the same things also, and I shake my head a little bit because, like, that is your goal. Where they're going to go ultimately. I know the success is something you should be celebrating too. I said with my days at General Mills, I was lucky. I had some amazing leaders, and when I moved on, it couldn't be more encouraging and excited for me, and so many amazing things that I've learned, and certainly try to pass it on elsewhere. Anybody else that I'm coaching or in charge with. I actually almost start with the premise because I work with lots of different students saying you don't have to keep working with me. If I want to, I want to help you. But yeah, this relationship. It's me really there to help you. And one of the types of leadership styles that's out there, and there's lots of different kinds, is described as servant leadership, and it's kind of what we're describing here, where you really look at yourself as there to help the people that you're tasked with leading, guiding them. Right? We said mentoring, helping them see blind spots, helping them with their goals. It's for every reason why anybody needs a coach. Look at professional athletes at the highest level of their games. They're not doing that by themselves. They're having somebody there to coach them and help them realize, what are their shortcomings? When do they need a pep talk? When do they need something to really motivate by a long-term goal? So it is kind of disappointing when you hear something like that from a leader, because also you never know when they're going to come back in your life and what they're going to say to other people who are going to encourage you to come back. So, I would feel the same way, a little disappointed when you hear that kind of stuff.
When you look at the Great Resignation, right? I mean, they're coining this term now because I mean, I think we're seeing that, and that's a whole other show to talk about the supply chain issues that are happening, and folks who are not going back to their jobs, or maybe finding better jobs with a better work-life balance, or finding more of a livable wage in these particular roles. You take a look at, how our practices as a society are to sort of onboard people, and say some of the turnaround time that happens in the onboarding process, where I read something the other day where it was a substantial amount of money for somebody to come into a particular position, last for about 6 months to a year, and then leave for the company because it's just they're back to square one again. What do you think we're not getting right as organizations, and what are we not getting right as maybe people applying to these particular positions to say, is this a fit for me or is this not?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you know what? There's lots of reasons why people are going to come to get hired into a job and leave, and actually, they're not always necessarily the same things. Classic example to me is developmental opportunities. People don't look for jobs necessarily because they see their chances of moving up the corporate ladder, and there's actually quite a bit of research on this. The Society of Human Resource Management, for example, has shown where they've done some surveys where the advancement opportunities is really kind of high up on the list of why people leave a company, and one of the lowest reasons why somebody actually wants to join a company. So it is complex, of course, thinking, why am I actually going to come here? Why am I going to, what's causing me to leave? Um, salary, compensation, benefits, the people you work with are often pretty high on those lists as what's keeping somebody versus leaving. And what we're seeing right now is pretty unprecedented. Why is it happening? I think in part because like we've already kind of talked about, you got some of these companies who are being very responsive, who are being a little bit more innovative, and some that are kind of locked in, pushing people out the door that way. That's kind of partly what I'm seeing, wondering about. It is very industry specific too. So I don't know how long we're gonna. I don't know if this is just a moment in time or something we're actually going to see a little bit more people realizing that, well, actually, employees, we are the ones who have power, and that's kind of been flipped for a while, where organizations had a lot more power, and now it's like, well, no, I have the power to choose where I want to work, how I want to work. I like my work-life balance, and if you can't give that to me, I'm going to go find somebody who will.
It just amazes to me, Kyle, and I've said this many times, right, to friends of mine and even my wife. It's like, you know, you need to be a whole person all the way around, right? And especially if you have kids and you have young kids, you want to be there for your kids. You want to make sure that you're going to work, because I think we all go to work and we all do jobs because we keep the lights on. We're able to put food on the table. But at the end of the day, if you're too tired to do that, or you're too emotionally tapped out, or again, the notifications on your phone don't stop, or you choose to look at those notifications on your phone, it erodes at your quality of life. And I think if the pandemic has taught anybody anything positive in that sense, from a worker standpoint, is to say, what am I doing all this for? Right? Like why am I killing myself to do this? Is there a better way I can do this and still have my, I hate to say it, but have my cake and eat it too? But it shouldn't be that, because I think we all have families, or we're in particular positions where we're able to really connect with what's meaningful to us, and to have that balance, I think, is so key. I know I often heard from people saying work life balance is those. I mean, I guess it's maybe just getting out of that traditional mindset. Say, hey, 9 to 5, if it's happening, it's not necessarily 9 to 5 anymore. It might be 8 till 2, and then 7 till 12, or if you've got a big project, and then the next day maybe you're doing 3 or 4 hours, or as long as, I guess, those metrics are getting done. But why, I just don't understand, like, why some companies are so insistent on going back to the old way. It's like, it's almost like Netflix, right, versus Blockbuster. We're at
Yeah.
that paradigm shift on whether or not you're returning tapes to the store. You're just going to download the app, and then you've got all those selections. It's like, what's it going to take us into the next 10 to 15 years with?
Yeah, it's a great analogy, because I think what gets lost, a lot of what just happened this last year, is we've got technology now that we've never had before that enables us to work from home better than we've ever had before, and it's getting better and better. Collaboration tools, communication tools that allow you to collaborate way more effectively than you ever could have possibly done that before virtually. So it's actually it was kind of a perfect storm in that sense, that we're kind of forced to work from home, and hey, guess what? We have technologies. I mean, I'm not just talking about Zoom, but Slacks, a lot of technologies. I'll use, project management tools, whiteboarding tools, sharing our screens with people that you couldn't have done this a while ago. That enables you to collaborate way more effectively virtually than you ever could have before. As far as having your cake and eating it too, that's the hybrid work model. And that's the model I recommend. I think it's a great model to go with right now, not especially knowing what the future will hold, but it does give you the cake and eat it too. Now, hybrid can mean a lot of different things. You were just talking, for example, about how some people will want to work at random hours, and I don't know, that definitely will work for all hybrid companies. One thing I talk a lot about, and something I really emphasize when people are thinking about going hybrid, is you can't just say come in whenever you want. It has to be structured hybrid. Is kind of the word I would use, and that is, if you really want employees in a couple days a week, then say the days that they're supposed to come in, because the whole point in doing that, as far as I'm concerned, is to collaborate. The reason to get people in the office is that they can see each other, collaborate, build up that trust, build up that cohesion, ask those questions that they're not asking now, feel again that sense of community, get back aligned on those shared goals, have those meetings that are more effective in person. And then you can still have your work-life balance. You don't have to come to the office those couple of days. You can spend a little bit more extra at home. And so that is a model that makes a lot of sense to me right now. Now the world's changing, but right now, that's the model I would be going with.
Yeah, I think we're going to see more of that as we go, and I think, again, that's reflective in quote unquote the Great Resignation too. It's like, people are realizing that they can put in more time, and they're able to enjoy life's moments minus the commute too. I mean, I remember the early days of the pandemic when, everything was happening back in March 2020. I mean, you could fire a cannon down the Easy Row Expressway. There was nobody on the road.
Yeah.
I mean, a little different now, right? I think, not to say people aren't, I guess maybe a little bit more lackadaisical when it comes to COVID, but I think generally speaking, there's a little bit more commuting time on the roads. But for those, I was talking to a gentleman in my neighborhood who's an accountant, um, actually down the road from us, and he was saying that he's getting more work done just working from home, generally speaking, but having a harder time sort of connecting with some of the juniors on his team, because they need a little bit more structuring. So they're going to a certain hybrid model where they can do a touch point at the location once or twice a month for bigger projects that are coming through the pipe when they're doing some auditing. So it's interesting to see that, and it's something else I wanted to get your opinion on, Kyle. Often they'll see different organizations in the media saying how they're having those staffing issues, and how they can't keep people in, and they're having turnover time and they can't hire anybody. Is it a question, in your opinion, Kyle, of the brittleness of the organization, in the sense of maybe not having the right resources, or not having the funding, or the compensation models to keep people engaged? Or is it a question of the pandemic being the pandemic? Or is it something more to say that these issues are happening from an organizational standpoint? When I say the company's brittle, is the fact that, I heard somebody say once, a good company, sometimes you have to keep, quote unquote, the fat on. So when times are hard, you have some cushioning. And people are more apt to feel like they're more valued, and they're able to go, versus if they cut, strip away, when you get rocked by something, it's easier to break because there's not a lot of padding there.
Yeah. Arms is exactly what what I do a lot of the research on is this resilience. How do you develop a resilient capacity as a team, as an organization, that when you get hit with something like this, you're able to withstand it? And some of that is having that extra load. Not kind of whittling down all your resources so that you're not able to adjust. Companies that were able to successfully improvise during the pandemic, some have flourished. A lot of companies have done better now than they were doing well before, and obviously we've got a lot of companies who are not doing very well, and it was just kind of a bad luck of the draw of the type of industry you're in. I don't think I've got an answer. It's something I've been thinking about a lot. If what the question you're asking is why is it that people, the leaving is the question I still don't have an answer for. I was talking about this with a friend of mine on LinkedIn actually the other day. Actually wrote an article also on the Great Resignation, and I kept asking the question because I don't get it either. It's something that is surprising to me. So that kind of suggests to me that there's something unique going on right now with the pandemic, because I don't think organizations are necessarily doing something that different right now. But I that's one that I'm also wondering about, to be really honest with you.
Yeah, it's funny from a business standpoint, right? And it's different when you work in the public sector versus profit sector, right? Like I always compare my time at the CBC versus broadcast private media, right, where we had to have advertisers to pay the bills. And I often say that, if you're able to take a look at who is able to kind of get into the mindset of how do we retain and recruit the best talent during a global changing event, or like I said, something rocking the boat, for like COVID, right? So now it's sort of like, go back to the real estate buyer sellers market. Right now it's like you had said, the employees have the decision on where they want to go. So I would think a forward thinking company, is what I'm trying to say, is going to
Mm-hmm.
be able to take a look at all the talent out there, and maybe make their offers, I would hope, a little bit more attractive, to retain and recruit the best talent, to position them better into the future, knowing that maybe there is certain things that they can offer individuals, compensation wise and otherwise, to get them on the team and keep them on their team, because now there is a little bit more of a selection to where you want to go.
Yeah, no, exactly. So again, it's going to come from a company basis. If you're struggling as a company to keep the people, I mean, retention is what we should be prioritizing more than anything, just because the cost of losing employees is really expensive. It's something we don't necessarily always think about. It begs you to consider what's going on and actually reflect and start making some changes. I think some people will try to put the blame off somebody else. This is kind of what I was speaking to when it comes to improvisation is adapting, recognizing there's something going on. Okay, we're losing more people than we have before. So you need to be monitoring what's going on in your workforce and saying it's an us thing. And that can be hard to realize that it's okay, maybe there's something unique to us. Why is this happening? What can we do then to be more attractive or to also keep people retained? And I mean, questions like that can be answered by going to your employees. We do know that people leaving a company, quitting, can be a little contagious. Even that once it kind of starts, it snowballs. People start seeing other people leaving. You're like, whoa, they must know that there's something wrong, because if these 5 people are leaving, it does start to snowball out of control. And so that might have a little bit to do with what we're seeing now. But yeah, if I was a company, I would try to say, well, what's going wrong? What could I be doing differently? And compensation is the lever we always pull, but it's one of the more useless ones, because we know people want way more than just money. Money doesn't really separate too many jobs in companies. Most of the ones in your what you do is going to be relatively similar. So it's things like the work-life balance we've talked about. What are your advancement opportunities? The type of people that are you working there, the projects you're doing. And there's lots of other ways to make your place attractive, highlighting your culture fit, making sure that your postings are everywhere. And so there's lots of things that you could be doing. I would look first inwards and understand, why are people leaving? Exit interviews, things like that can give you a lot of information about what's actually happening in your own company.
And pizza parties. Can we talk about pizza parties? like pizza
Pro
party.
pizza parties?
Yeah, throw pizza. Like, what is your take?
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about
Absolutely.
that. What's your take on the whole? And I've seen, like I've said many times on the show before with my guests, like my wife and I are on TikTok. We don't post any TikTok videos. I'm on it. I find it very entertaining. But I love to see a lot of HR folks on there, which I don't know if they should be on there, but where they're on there. Right. And some of folks like who do what you do, kind of doing these informative TikToks, and they say, we have this mass, people are leaving left and right, or, this employee satisfaction's at like 32%. I know, let's give them a pizza party. Right. And I laugh at that stuff, because it's like, pizza, they've said many times, that big fan of The Office. Michael Scott once said, pizza is the great equalizer. But at the same token, it's like, can you be real with your employees and say, okay, maybe if it's not in the like, what else can they do? Like, why is pizza such a mindset, or different gifts, small tokens of appreciation? Is it, some people might say it's disingenuous, but other people are like right into it. Like, what's your take on that?
Well, my first take is everything Michael Scott says is gold. So, it's true. Pizza is the great equalizer. But it's funny, people can see through it, obviously, when they're just doing it because they realize people are leaving. It's one of those things that we've really lost. It's so complex. We've got this model right now where people aren't seeing their colleagues as much. So if you're home, and again, I'm hearing things from different companies, different places. I find it all pretty fascinating, where you got some companies who are saying we're going completely remote, which would be super attractive to some, and others are like, wait, what do you mean you're going completely remote? I like being in an office. I like socializing with people. So like you're robbing me of that. And I'm pro any pizza party. I'm pro things that get people together and communicate, and we're all naturally social beings. The workplace is our escape for being social and, feeling like we're belonging and feeling attached to a community. And for a lot of us, it's gone right now. And so it's kind of easy to look at our jobs as lacking that interpersonal attachment. If we could, it'd be great to have more get-togethers, but even virtual get-togethers. When we was going through the pandemic, that was something I saw a lot of, and I loved it, and I encouraged more of it. One of the things that was the hardest right now still is that we don't have enough time with our colleagues. Whether it's games night, I saw people doing trivia nights, virtual escape rooms, anything in which you can just be a person, not a worker, and socialize with people. It's great for building morale. So it can feel like it's like a, whatever, give them a pizza party and then they're going to stay longer. I think for a lot of people it does matter, but we're trying to solve a situation that is so specific to each individual.
Sure.
So from a company lens, it's, when you look at it, the industry, it's like, yeah, something's going on, But if you've got a company of 30 people, you just got to really focus on what's going on internally and get a pulse and make sure that you haven't thrown aside, still trying to do those behaviors and make sure everyone feels appreciated. Again, compensation is the one that we come back to, but what most people want is to feel appreciated. Money is one way you show somebody you're appreciated. Checking in and saying, hey, how are you doing? How's your family? That's a pretty powerful one, and it's free. Pizza parties, any gifts, recognition of different sorts. People just want to know that they're cared for. If they're cared for, they're going to stay. Like people want to be where they're cared for.
I think that's great insight too, and I think that is a testament to a good leadership team, and certainly the good outreach that happens too, right, from your employee base to have those. Because I find, in my experience, when you have that sort of connection with folks that you work with across different departments, it's when the walls come down a bit, and they start to talk to you about some of the things that are happening, or and you get to see, I think, a wide spectrum of. I'll throw it out there. The Debbie Downers, the ones that, I always say you give them a solid gold brick and 5 weeks vacation and they're still going to be miserable, versus the ones that are, they're over the moon because they, you provided something. But I think when you're able to connect with folks like that one-on-one, I mean, it's a testament of, having a good pulse, like you said, of what's happening in the organization as well. The $1 million question for you, and with your wide experience with research and working with companies and organizations, and maybe there's not a direct answer on this, right? It's a kind of the hockey team answer on this one, but I'm going to throw it at you. Is the what makes a good leader? What makes a tried and true leader? I always say that some of the bosses I've worked with, I used to work with one lady at CKLW way back when, probably 2005. She was our marketing director. She's now up in Toronto running some stuff for Bell, but she was a Tom Hanks, Saving Private Ryan, I say, leader, in the sense that, we could be going over hell and back going into the breach, and I'd be like, okay, Sarge, let's go. Without a second, I wouldn't even think about it. But whatever you need, like Heidi, whatever you need, I will do it. I will do it for you, easy. What makes it to that leadership point for folks, so you have people going into the breach for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's first to pause and say, like, it's hard to be a good leader, and you're not always going to be a good leader. It takes a lot of little sorts of behaviors, I think, to build up to becoming a really great leader. So it's not out of our reach either. What you just said a second ago is one of those elements of what it takes to be a great leader, and that's being really individualized with each one of your employees. To not treat, people say, what's the best leadership style? And the answer is, who are you leading? Because the style at which you want to lead somebody depends on the person that you're tasked with leading. You're not going to use the same approach with everybody. You have to understand, well, what's their personality? What motivates them, right? What gets them ticked? What do they really dislike? And so you need to have that one-on-one relationship. So I'd say one thing a great leader does is they have that really individualized relationship with each person, treats them each differently, gets to know them. One of my little tidbits of advice I tell leaders to do, and again, maybe it seems disingenuous, but to me, it isn't, is, think about big milestones in your employees' lives. Birthdays or their kids' birthdays and stuff, and put in your calendar when it comes, wish them happy birthday, ask them about their kids' birthdays. Little things like that. What you're doing is you're creating a space in your head that says, you matter to me enough that I'm willing and I want to remember these things, and I want you to know that you care about me. So that's one element, is that individualized relationship. The other one that really makes a great leader, and this is all informed from research, is one that's really great at pushing their followers to challenge their own assumptions. We talked before about psychological safety. I mean, a really great leader creates this safe space where people aren't afraid. If I mess up, he's going to get on my case. She's going to get on my case. I'm never going to get the end of it. I'm never going to get these other responsibilities. I won't advance in the company. Nobody's ever going to trust me. I'm going to then keep it safe in the background. And so one thing leaders really need to try to do is creating that psychologically safe space, allowing people to make mistakes, allowing people to speak up and have disagreements. And so it's to really push them to think outside the box and feel safe actually challenging them too, is another thing that's really important. Why are people leaving? Because they don't get to have a say in their company. They don't. Again, people want to matter. They want to belong. They want meaning in their work. They want to show up. And this is more different than ever. They want to feel like what they're doing matters. And it's really hard to feel that way if you're not able to have a voice, or when you do, you're just shot down. And probably the last thing I'd say that a really great leader does, and we kind of talked about it along the lines of coaching, setting goals for people, challenging goals in the moment, but big picture goals, because it's hard for people to lose track of, what am I doing really well? What am I not doing well? And a lot of people want that development. They need that development. One thing I saw a lot of in the pandemic is, we were talking, but we were just talking about what we were doing. Feedback, coaching really kind of went to the wayside. And that's another big thing that's what people want. They want that feedback. They want to know what they're doing well, what they can improve upon. They want the check-ins. And so if we're not doing that on a somewhat regular basis, we're doing them a disservice, and then also ourselves, because then they're not going to improve.
Different type of leadership style though too, right, Kyle? You look at the last almost 2 years now, geez, since COVID. I mean, managing and leading through normal times versus, you think back even to March 2020, crisis leadership. It's a different beast too, right? And that's certainly factored into, I think, a lot of managers and leaders to say, yeah, I may have gotten more gray hair, but we're trying to, again, that ties into that whole resilience piece as well.
Yeah, one thing we know for sure about a crisis is that it amplifies how leaders have an effect on their people. During a crisis, we look to our leaders more than ever, and we saw that with our country as well when we came together. March 2020, I was glued to the TV for that month. I kind of stepped away after that. But you're looking for guidance when there's so much uncertainty. That's when leaders really shine. But it does switch and shift. We're talking about leading a company versus leading individuals, leading a team. It requires a little bit different kinds of mind shifts. Again, it's a really difficult job. Most people are promoted into leadership roles not because they want to lead people, because they're really good at their job. And so it's like, well, you're really good at your job. How about you try leading people? And it's like, well, I don't actually want to do that. I'm not really good at that. A lot of people don't get trained on how to be a good leader. They don't get feedback both ways. And so leaders are the ones that kind of get a lot of the blame. They get the credit when it's there, but they get a lot of the blame too, and probably unfairly. I feel like that's something we've been, going on the podcast and having some critiques, but it's a really difficult job. And so just the same as they need that latitude to make the mistakes and learn and grow in their leadership roles.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing too. And I think, leaders aren't always going to get it right. I think, we've seen that from a politician standpoint for through this whole pandemic. I also think that, no excuses aside, the term has been beaten to death, but unprecedented times. And I think a lot of us are in fight or flight mode, survival mode too. So I think, hopefully you would think that a lot of these folks, especially from a political lens, are doing things, I would hope, out of the goodness of their heart and in the best interests of the general public too. But, it's an opportunity to, support each other and rely on each other. And I think, you and I were saying this before the show is, and I've said this many times on my program, it's, the world is in a different place right now. I think that there's, this underlying, not all the time, but a little bit of an anger that's there. And I think a lot of the accusatory actions happen where, I think the art of reaching across the aisle and trying to understand somebody else's viewpoint is an art that, and a skill that is quickly being fossilized like the dinosaurs, because we're so easy to grab a pitchfork and burn somebody at the stake virtually versus, let's maybe understand where somebody's coming from and let's try to say, okay, well, maybe this may not be an equitable solution. Let's try to find something that is and work together. And I think that's going to be, in my opinion, Kyle, that's going to be a crucial need in the next 4 to 5 years, not even locally, but just really across the world too. It's just saying, okay, we all know we're in the for lack of a better term, the shitter for this. Like how do we get out of this collectively? And work together to make it right.
Yeah, it's there's a lot that I'm shaking my head because that stuff just drives me nuts. When all the finger pointing and polarization that you do see happening, the lack of openness to changing your opinion, it drives me. That drives me really nuts. Probably as an academic, recognizing that that's what we do. That's what life is. It's you get a new source of information and you're supposed to change your opinion. And actually, some really great research is coming out showing us that we actually look at people as being more competent when they do change their opinion. Maybe as having less power and authority, but we look at them as more competent, and rightfully so. So that is a skill I think we need to maybe start developing a little bit more in society, in people, is that adaptability, the openness to say, oh, that's a new piece of information that I wasn't aware of. My perspective will change, and that's not a sign of weakness.
Yeah.
Same thing with leadership.
Yeah, and I think the compassion piece is so crucial too. I mean, that ties into the perspective
Yep.
change. Like, at some point, I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and we were talking about sort of the back and forth that goes on sometimes in the political lens, and you should be doing this, and you're not doing this,
Yeah.
and the whataboutisms, right? Like somebody will come at you and say, well, what about this person, and what about that person, and they should be doing that, and you'd made a mention, much like you, I was glued to my news, and I still very much was through the majority of the pandemic. But then I made a conscious decision at the beginning of 2021 to shut it off. And, I still get the updates on what's happening locally, but I'm also cognizant of the fact that I know from a lens that sometimes we're, hardwired for the negative. And, that's one of the reasons, Kyle, I wanted to start the show, is to have that positive lens, but also have those crucial conversations when needed, to say that there's some other content out there for folks to absorb. So I may not get all the clicks and the likes, and I'm okay with that. But
Hmm.
I'll die on a hill, like I said, to at least open up people's eyes and they'll change their opinions on a particular topic, person, or even just educate them a little bit more on something they may not have known. But that compassion piece, I just think it's just, I mean, not to say that it's not out there, because God, when it's out there, I mean, it, because you can see these folks doing things for other people here locally that's just absolutely incredible, and it makes me think, okay, well, my son that I'm raising is, there's still hope for the world. Right? Like there's still
Yeah.
good people in this world, and it's you
Yeah.
kind of have to keep the faith in that sense.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. We're totally eye to eye, and yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I mean, a lot of it's lack of empathy. I mean, for some reason, we can't seem to put ourselves in other people's shoes and try to wonder what's going on with them and why are they making these decisions. We evaluate them through our own narratives, and they're usually pretty negative and accusatory. But it's like, well, you wouldn't do that if it was you. A classic example I give with my students too is you see somebody speeding down the highway and you say, and that person's a crazy person, but suddenly you're really late to a meeting or there's an emergency and you're speeding down the highway. It's like, well, now I've got a reason to. And it's the same sorts of things that we're seeing elsewhere where we just make judgments about other people without really understanding what they're doing and why they've done it. And yeah, I hope I'm with you. I mean, I'm a positive person and anybody knows me. And I hope we can shift that narrative to try to be a little bit more open and empathetic to other people.
Yeah, with your students and what you teach at the U, and you interact, how do you feel about the next generation of leaders and business professionals that are coming through? Do you feel confident that they're going to be starting on a different foot, or are we in good shape for down the road when you and I are old and gray and retired, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I can only say good things about my students at the U, but they really impress me a lot. I mean, I know this university in particular really impressed me a lot with their work ethic, how much they juggle and still really put a lot of ton of their passion in. From a leadership perspective, I see a lot of wants for making a difference, more than I think I've seen before. Uh, and this is something I've heard anecdotally, but I see it myself too, where students don't want to just get a job and make money and move on. As a lot of them, I see wanting to actually do something that really matters and make a difference. Um, just like when we were students, still lost about what I'm actually going to end up doing, but making sure that it's meaningful, actually having an impact is something that I see a lot of, and also having lots of struggles like all of us too. With lots of challenges, balancing work with the pandemic, stresses that exist, but I've got pretty full faith in them.
What's one piece of advice, Kyle, before we wrap it up this evening, that you can give to folks who are watching the live stream or watching the rebroadcast after the fact, about if they're in a position where they think that they need to make a pivot or do something a little bit more in line with their core values?
You know what? I'd have to give credit out to one of my good friends and mentor that was helping coach me when I decided to go back to to graduate school. When I was working at General Mills, he worked with Simon Sinek and started with Why. So Stephen Shadletsky gave me this great advice, a former classmate of mine, and Simon's book really was really helpful for me, at least. So that's an advice I would also give to other people, which is trying to connect with what your purpose, what you want it to be too. I think a lot of us think that everybody wants a similar path or similar wants in the day, money or family or whatever it might be. But when it comes to your actual job, and we actually just did that with my class this week, looking at 50, 60 attributes that would make you really happy about your job, whether it's the autonomy, the compensation, the benefits, who you're working with, the challenge that you get, the variety of the kinds of works, and saying, well, What do you really want? What really will matter to you? And it starts with reflection and really trying to identify. So my biggest advice for somebody kind of starting out there is to start actively being reflective, thinking a little bit more about what is it you really want. What is it in the past then that maybe has made you happy, that you've really felt maybe your flow, which is an experience in which you're just completely immersed in what you're doing. That time just seems to fly by, and if you can find that, go get it, because a lot of people don't, and life is too short to be doing something that you don't love.
Love it. It's funny how life brings us into those particular realms to do the things that we love to do. And we were saying before the show, I mean, that's one of the main reasons I wanted to do this program, is because I love having these conversations. I love the broadcast lens, and I love having that insight from guests like yourself. So I want to thank you for coming on the show. I am in awe of the work you do and you continue to do. And I highly encourage anybody who has LinkedIn. Obviously, check out Kyle's website too. Lots of information on there. But follow him on LinkedIn. Send him a request. He's got great content that comes out all the time, and it's really opened my eyes to a lot of things about what a positive workplace is, and how you can really look for that effective leadership, so you can be coached and continue to be resilient through these hard times. So it is an absolute pleasure to have you, and thank you for spending some time with me tonight, Kyle.
Thanks, Arms. It means a lot.
I appreciate it more than you know. Kyle Brykman from the University of Windsor, great guy, just so well spoken, and certainly knows a lot about what you can expect in the workplace. And he's right. I mean, work life is so huge for companies, and I just wish a lot of progressive companies would know what that meant to their employees. you know Kyle's got some great information. Again, he's the assistant professor of management at the Odette School of Business at the U of W, focusing on the employee voice, interpersonal team dynamics, team resilience, conflict. Basically, how do you collaborate and communicate more effectively? Amazing guy. Lots of information. You can find it out on his website too, and dive into that information, kylebrykman.com. Okay, folks, that's going to do it for this edition, the 30th edition of the Arms Movement Leg Project. We hope that you had a great program with us. Don't forget, we are continually look for some great sponsors to help us out with the show. We would love for you to connect with Windsor Essex. You can reach over 17,000 people engaged with on this show monthly. You can be a part of positive conversations and be a sponsor of the Arms Women Leg Project. We are looking for sponsors. You can message me directly on what that would entail for you and your organization, and we'd love to have that conversation to continue to spread good news through the digital airwaves here each week on the project. Speaking of the project, a lot of people are messaging and saying, hey, can I be a guest on the show? I've got a really good guest idea. Love it. You can continue to message me on Facebook if you've got a local guest who could have a great story, or could be like Kyle, an expert in their particular field. I'm actually booking into season 2 of the show. Season 2 of the Arms Movement Leg Project will kick off in January of 2022. I am completely booked out for the rest of the year, which is awesome news. And we've got some really amazing people on the horizon coming up for the Arms Movement Leg Project. So I'm really pumped up to continue to do the show for you here in the Windsor Essex area. So next week we'll be chatting with Maggie DeRoche and Sylvia Gunther from the Hiatus House. They will be on the program talking a little bit about what's happening at the Hiatus House and some very sobering statistics on domestic violence here in Windsor Essex locally. Have a great rest of the evening. Enjoy the night. And if I don't see you next couple of days, a happy Thanksgiving to you and your family from my family. Thanks for watching the project.